or last weekend. Last weekend, I took a few days off to spend time with my family. My family came together. I have a brother that lives in Portugal. His family didn't come, but everybody else, we gathered to celebrate my sister's 60th birthday. It was a nice 3 days. We rented a place and all came together. And I did something that I don't normally do. I stayed up almost to midnight, which is rare for me these days, for a specific thing. My niece and nephews were there, and they were all excited about the Grammys. And so all day it was about getting ready for the Grammys. And I would have just soon gone to bed, quite frankly. But because it was family and it was them, I'm like, okay, I'm in it. I think I can make it through the whole thing. Let's go for it. And I wanted to see and experience it through their eyes. And, so the different generations of watching this. And I was so glad I watched it. Because there was one particular moment. There were a lot of moments. But there was one moment when one of my heroes stepped out on stage, surprisingly, Tracy Chapman. Tracy Chapman stood out on stage in her blue jeans and just like Tracy Chapman, glowing with the light within her soul. And she began to sing her song that had been a hit many, many years ago called Fast Cars. But what made it so powerful is she was joined so Tracy Chapman is a 59-year-old African-American lesbian music artist who really stays out of the light a lot, but is a masterful singer, an incredible heart. And she sang it with a younger man, 33-year-old Luke Combs, who's made that song popular again today in the country western genre. And so here they stood on stage together, Ebony and Ivory. Two very different followings. And yet from the whole Grammy event, what has been most talked about was that. Some people said there was more healing and hope demonstrated for building bridges instead of walls in that moment, in that performance, than anything that had happened in the last decade. And I tend to agree. It was a very, very powerful moment of having people that can appear to be very different yet come together and have genuine respect for each other because they admire each other's artistry, each other's creativeness, each other's heart. And we're doing something together in a way that just exuded respect. And it translated. And to me, that was very, very hopeful. Now, an interesting juxtaposition, if you will, I want to take you to another Grammy. And I'll date some of us because I'm going to take us back to 1990. I was much younger and could stay awake easier for that one that year. That year, the talk that year was the best new artist. In 1990, the best new artist went to a group that had kind of stormed the United States. They were doing great. They came from Germany, and their name was Milli Vanilli. Now, some of you know where this is going. They win a Grammy for their music. Just a short time later, they're on live television, MTV, singing their song, which actually they weren't singing. It was a soundtrack. And what happened on live TV is something happened and the record starts jumping. And so they're like, I send my love, I send my love, I send my love. It's like, you can't, they couldn't get beyond it. And so they were kind of outed as being lip syncers. And so they had to give their Grammy back. I'm bringing us up to date on our Grammy history here. They literally had to give it back when that was discovered. They couldn't sing, they weren't singing. And a former fan put, ain't nobody likes lip service if they ain't got nothing to back it. And I thought to myself, that will preach. Ain't nobody likes lip service if they ain't got nothing to back it. That is sort of what Jesus said in his time when the religious elite of the day, when those who were putting themselves closer to God and others had to jump through a lot of hoops. When they were out in the streets praying really loud prayers and doing all of these things, and he was saying, why are you doing this and then going back here and not living it out? In other words, he was saying, ain't nobody likes lip service if you ain't got nothing to back it. And we all know what that feels like. Well, to me, that's a beautiful way to begin to look at the season of nonviolence. Dr. Arun Gandhi was Mahatma Gandhi's grandson. Many of you know he was right here celebrating our 70th anniversary with us 5 years ago. He has since crossed over, but it was a powerful experience to be in his presence and to hear the stories of his father and what he in his own life had learned. And so it was Arun Gandhi that had really understood the work of his grandfather. He understood the work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He understood the teachings of Jesus and the other master teachers, and that we're here to live out the golden rule. It shows up in every faith tradition, and not just simply as an idea, not just at those times when it's convenient, but we're here to live that out. And so an idea occurred to him back in 1998, and what happened is he worked with a group of people, and they created what is called the Season of Nonviolence. It's been taking place now since 1998. It begins every year on January 30th and runs for 64 days to April 4th. January 30th is the date of the anniversary of the assassination of Mohandas Gandhi. And then 64 days later is the date of the anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And so many individuals, communities, spiritual communities, governments now around the world are committed to specifically on those 64 days, not only those days, but hopefully during that window of time of becoming more intentional about what it means to be a presence of peace. What does it really mean to truly live the golden rule? Not just talk about it as an idea, and not just when it's convenient, but to really treat others, all others, the way we'd want to be treated. To let love lead instead of our fears, instead of the things that separate us. To find a way where we don't put our head in the sand, we don't pretend that evil and evil actions aren't happening, but how do we be present to those things, and how do we be in our own body and with our own stuff going on in a way that truly does embody the presence of peace, and specifically nonviolence. Arun Gandhi pointed to how, again, through all the many different spiritual traditions, you see this. If you look at Buddhism, Buddhism emphasizes the concept of ahimsa. Ahimsa is absence of harm, that whatever you do, live with an absence of harm. And a practice of metta kindness, being kind. Metta means beyond just yourself, beyond just the familiar, beyond just those you like, learning to be kind. Hinduism has that same concept of ahimsa, which means harm none. Islam, in its teachings, has the concept of salam, which means harm none. Taoism teaches the principle of wu-wei, which is harm none. And certainly, Jesus, the teachings of love your neighbor as yourself, love your God, love yourself, love your neighbor, forgive, are all teachings of harm none. Jesus even went so far as to say, love your enemy. Now that's radical. But he was trying to get people to really go deep enough to see, if you love your enemy, you have no enemy. And all that you have left are neighbors. Some of them you may like to be around, and some of them you may not really like to be around. Some of them may be sandpaper for your soul. Some of them you may vehemently disagree with the way they believe and how they show up, but they are still your neighbors. And so there's an energy that we can get caught up in without even realizing it, where we are fighting against enemies, that we see something evil. The whole challenge with having the devil and a concept of evil be so strong is that when evil becomes personified, made into a person, made into a group of persons, many people believe it gives them license to hate those persons because they have reduced them to the personification of evil. That's why Jesus said, don't have a consciousness of an enemy. We have to find ways to get beyond adversarial consciousness. Yes, somebody may be fighting against you. Yes, you may be at complete opposites. But there's a way to deal with the actions. There's a way to be present to what's going on We hold people accountable. We're not saying it's not happening. But I do and will never, hopefully, demonize you or get caught up in wanting to be hurtful and evil back to you. Otherwise, we just keep perpetuating the same thing. Amen? So how do we begin to do this? Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, said, "It is the law of spirit that we must become what we would draw to us. If we would draw to us love, we must be love, be loving and kind. If we would have peace and harmony in our environment, we must establish it within ourselves. To establish it within ourselves, be it in order to experience it in our world." And so a little bit about the concept of nonviolence. Sometimes when you hear the word nonviolence, you might all automatically think not doing, that it almost sounds like inaction or not doing. It may be reduced to thinking that you just are ignoring or dismissing something. It's not that. You may perceive it to be inaction. It is not inaction. You may think it's putting energy into trying to ignore or outsmart. It's not that. You may think that nonviolence is simply the absence of conflict or simply condoning or excusing. It's not any of those things. The activity of nonviolence is the presence of peacefulness. Gandhi called it soul force. It's bringing to bear something that's bigger than whatever is going on out here. Rumi pointed to it when he said, beyond all ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there's a place and I'll meet you there. It's learning to be in that place. It's learning to find that level of awareness within ourselves so that we have a better chance of staying connected and more at peace when we find ourselves in those situations. And we all know with this election year, we could all use some training and participating and practicing on how do I stay centered? How can I really, really be a presence that's going to be helpful? I want to see better things happening in our world. Amen? I want to see people who are ethical and kind and respectful and represent with love and dignity and compassion. I want to see those people in leadership. I want to see legislation that honors the dignity of all people, that it upholds our sacred connection. We want to see those things. And so in order to be people that can work for those things, we must first embody a way that we can be about it without getting so caught up that we get reduced. And when all else fails, there's always a genuine apology, because I guarantee you will fail. Someone asked me just a couple of Sundays ago, they said, I look at you and it just seems like you never get frazzled. I said, just talk to my partner or anybody. Of course I do. And she said, really? I said, absolutely. And I said, as a matter of fact, just within the last 4 or 5 years, I had the worst arguments with my parents in my whole life, and I felt horrible because me trying to help them see something, I got so frustrated, I then just kind of lost it. Now, the good news is I was able to take some deep breaths, go back, and apologize. And in the long run, it actually made us even closer. But it felt horrible, and I hated that it happened. You're going to have some of that. You are going to fall flat on your face. You're going to think I've got it, and then, my Lord, why did I do it again? You just got to keep picking yourself back up and remembering, and the more you pick yourself back up, the more you do those things, you don't want to have to do it again. I do not want to experience that again. Next time I would just smile and say, I love y'all dearly, but I need some air. Just do what you got to do. So what? So I want to look at 5 quick ways. I call these 5 expressions. Sometimes when we think about concepts like peace or nonviolence, they're so big, it's hard to reduce it to what I call the so what. So what? So how do I actually show up? So I'm going to give you 5 so whats that are, in one sense, they're levels, but in another sense, they all work together, and I believe you'll see this. So an expression of peace and nonviolence Number one is love. When you genuinely love somebody, you're not going to hurt anybody you love. If you genuinely love somebody, you're willing to experience what we call tough love. But you are not going to be violent to someone that you love. And so the first thing we can do is to recognize our capacity for love, to give thanks for it, to practice it. These last month, January, we had an initiative, a challenge, a 21-day challenge for 21 days in a row to let someone know what you appreciate about them. Acknowledge something that you love that they've done, that you appreciate that they've done, some goodness. Many of you did that. Susan in Tennessee, I want to shout out. You sent us a beautiful letter. There's lots of people that did that, and you're expressing love. When you can, the Heart Math Institute has shown us scientifically that there's an intelligence in the heart that radiates through the entire being. And when you really feel love for something or someone, and when you can stay connected to that love and begin to send it out, you put yourself in a field of vibration that translates. It alters people and things around you to love. There's a story that comes from the Old Testament. It's referred to as the Tower of Babel. It's found in the first book of the Old Testament, Genesis chapter 11, and the story runs 1 through 9. And in a nutshell, it goes like this. It says, at a time that all humankind spoke a single language, the population began to grow, and it grew eastward. And they discovered a plain in the land of Babylon, and it was even soon quickly populated. The people who began there were one people, one language. And so they talked about building a great city with a temple tower that would reach to the skies, that would reach and put them directly in touch with God. And it would also serve as an eternal monument to them. They said, this will wield us together and keep us from scattering all over the world. So they made great piles of brick, and they began to use mortar, and they began to build it. And as the story goes, and it's interesting if you read it because it said, and the gods, plural, that the gods noticed what they were doing and stopped them. And the way the gods stopped them, it said, so the Lord confused their language so they could not understand one another, scattering them all over the earth and stopped them building the city. Thus it was called Babel, because they could not understand one another again. Now, the significance of that story, if you really read it, in Unity we realize that the Bible is a metaphysical, beyond the physical, beyond the literal, that the characters and the stories tell us about characteristics of our soul journey and of us. What this story is pointing out is so often we believe our greatest goal is to reach heaven, to touch the gods, that's where our saving grace is, and that needs to happen. But if that's our only pursuit, we miss our whole point of being on earth. And so when you're scattered about, all of a sudden your spiritual practice is no longer just vertical, it is very horizontal. This story is about the true connection comes when we understand we're not all meant to think the same. Unity is not uniformity nor conformity. That it's in our diverse, beautiful differences. It's in the many different ways the light and love of God is exemplified. When we can begin to work together, what it will take is discovering the language of the heart. You see, what transcends any other language is the language of the heart. And so love, that first thing is, how do we commit to placing ourselves in the presence of love and to learning to love? So love definitely is a way we can stay in the presence of peace and out of violence. Well, you may say, honestly, I would be lying. I just am not feeling love here. That's legit. So let's look at the next step, the next expression. The next expression we could say is compassion. You don't have to love someone to have compassion toward them, right? You may watch television. I have watched television and seen people where the wars are going on around and seeing people trying to get out, or women and children or men and children who have been kidnapped and are taken away, and I find myself crying. Now, I don't know them, but I have compassion on what that must feel like. I can't really imagine what it would feel like, but compassion is that part of us that says, but by the grace of God, that could be me, that could be my family. You know, compassion is that part of us that recognizes we are in this together. And one of the Buddhist practices is to begin to cultivate, if you want to cultivate compassion, when you look at another person and you're starting to feel some differences of opinion, you begin to say to yourself, well, you know what? Just like me, she wants to feel safe. Just like me, she wants to be understood. Just like me, she cares about what she believes in. And just like me, sometimes she probably lets her darker side get ahead of her light side. But just like me. So love, compassion, we can understand that those things will definitely help keep us in a place of peace and nonviolence. The third, then, the scriptures tell us to judge not, to withhold judgment. Being able to stay in a place of, I might not understand, may not even be able to comprehend it, can't imagine. But as long as I can stay in a place of, I'm not going to judge, then I'm not reducing you to a bad thing. You understand what we're saying here? To be able to keep yourself in that place of not judging. I live relatively close to here, and there was one day I was coming to the church, and I was on this road. There's a stop, and a car was coming here, and this pickup truck just really didn't even stop, pulled out, didn't seem to notice this one, and ran them almost in the ditch. And so when I witnessed it, it just shook me up, and I noticed inside of me, I immediately had compassion for the little car and the little lady that got ran off the road. And boy, was I riled up toward that big pickup truck, and that, you know, I thought I had a word for that, a person in that truck. And I thought, whoa, you know, like, ugh, that fast, that can still come up in me. But, you know, I got me shook up a little bit, my heart beating fast because it was almost an accident. I had to stop too. And so when I was coming to church and I'm in prayer about it, I said, you know, Holy Spirit, how can I shift more quickly like this? And I clearly heard, what if that driver of the truck was your father? I was like, oh, yeah. My 80-something-year-old dad out in his truck. Yeah, we don't know how long we're going to keep letting him drive very far. And it's like, immediately I thought, what if that was my father, my nephew? What if that was me on a bad day? It could have been anybody. And so one of the ways to begin to shift it is when you find yourself in those. And the beauty of it is it doesn't have to happen in the moment. In the moment, you may be spitting fire, as my grandma would say. You may be angry, but you don't want to land there. The way we change is at the end of the day, we say, gosh, that really irritated me. How could I see it differently? And so when we begin to realize we're one human family, we begin to see it differently. So we love, we have compassion, we learn how to withhold judgment. On withholding judgment, the Buddha had a powerful teaching. There's a story about the Buddha teaching to a group of people who had surrounded him, and he was talking about enlightenment. And this young man came up, and he started yelling things at the Buddha. You're not who you say you are. You're not telling anything that matters to anybody. What are you here? You're just taking up space. And so people are trying to listen to the Buddha, and this young man is yelling. And so now some of the people who were listening to the Buddha get up and they start yelling back at the man. They matching the energy. It's going back and forth. And the Buddha said, stop. He said, young man, may I ask you a question? The young man said, yes. He said, if you offer me a gift and I do not take it, whose gift is it? The young man said, if I offer you a gift and you don't take it, it's still my gift. He said, if you offer me your insult and I don't take it, whose insult is it? And the whole crowd went, He said, in the same way, it belongs to the one who has offered it. And in the same way, the words with which you have insulted me, they are not mine, they are yours. So to stay out of Buddha's not saying go to a holier than thou place. He's teaching us, this is a boundary teaching. When a person comes to you and they're very upset and they're expressing that and it's flowing out, that's what they're having to offer at this minute. It's up to you whether or not you take it on and get entangled. That's a huge, when we begin to learn that, but it is something we have to be aware of. I truly believe that's why Jesus always said, shake the dust off. A lot of stuff may get thrown at you. You may find your stuff in the midst of a lot of stuff. Shake it off and then do your introspection. Was there some truth there? Is there something I need to learn? What's mine to do in this without getting caught up in the aggression, in the fighting back? Love, compassion, judge not. The next one is do no harm. That one to me is pretty straightforward. Some people say, well, if it's come to that, if that's all that it's come to, well, I'm telling you, if you're on the brink of doing harm with your words, of doing harm with your thoughts, of doing harm with your actions, and you can stop yourself, do no harm, then that is an act of nonviolence. So to realize do no harm is a very, very powerful thing. In 2015, a survey went out, and the question was, should we bomb Agrabah? One question, should we bomb Agrabah? 49% of the people surveyed said yes, we should bomb Agrabah. What the people did not know is that Agrabah is a fictional cartoon city. It came from the movie Aladdin. But the point of the survey was, when they asked most people, there were a lot of reasons why they said, a whole lot of reasons, but the majority of people confessed it sounded Arab. And so what the survey was saying is that unless we really pay attention to the way we just run away with this or run away with that, we're likely to say, yeah, do this, and we don't even know what we're running behind saying, yeah, do this for. And so to love, to have compassion, to judge not, and to do no harm. And then the final one, Sarah, would you come on up? The final one is tend to where it hurts. One of the greatest things you can do to cultivate peace and nonviolence is to stop and to tend to where it hurts. There's a story from the Zen tradition that says, if a person is bit by a snake, a poisonous snake, and they turn and they run in anger after the poisonous snake, they do nothing but drive the venom further in their body. That a person who is bitten by a poisonous snake must always stop and tend to the wound. And yet so often in our lives, when something has hurt us, we run off chasing it and fighting against it, really driving that same energy further within ourselves. To be able to own it, to know it, to recognize it in a kind and gentle way. You're human, it happens. But what does it look like to you to tend the wound? How do you tend the hurt so that it harms none in your life or in any life? So to love, to express compassion, to begin to notice our judgments, and to become more conscious about withholding judgment. And again, it doesn't mean that you are dismissing or ignoring something which needs to be held accountable. You can hold a person accountable and still hold them in the light. It's about withholding judgment, a judgment that would create that enemy adversarial consciousness within your own self, and thereby reduces them to the sum of their actions and forgets that they have a soul and a spirit. Because the minute we do that, the minute we reduce them to absolute terribleness, end of discussion, we've said that they don't have a soul or a spirit that's capable of being changed. And I don't know about you, but I believe in a presence of a God that can help anything heal and transform and change. And so I don't want to ever me be the judge and say that I know they can't change, because I hold open the hope and the possibility. There's a lot of folks I'm praying for, a lot of politicians right now, hoping that they will change and believing that they will change. And to do that in a way that exudes love. Love, compassion, judge not. And then we move to do no harm. And finally, tend to where it hurts, so that at least you are not perpetuating the harm. How many of you are willing to engage that with us? To work on those, the season of nonviolence. In just a little bit, we'll tell you about our February initiative, and this will give you a way to engage in compassion if you choose to accept the invitation for February. But first, let's just take a few moments and anchor this in a meditative prayer with this song, if you'll sing it with me, that says, Gentle Spirit. Gentle Spirit, flow in me. Gentle Spirit, grow in me. Gentle Spirit, show in me. Gentle Spirit, know in me. One more time, just like that. Gentle Spirit. Gentle Spirit, flow in me. Gentle Spirit, grow in me. Gentle Spirit, shows in me. Gentle Spirit, knows in me. I invite you to close your eyes. If it's comfortable for you to just place your hand on your heart. Each person in this room has a human heart. Each person has their very own heart. And each heart is enlivened by a spirit, is animated by a presence that flows from beyond the individual. With each heartbeat, with each breath, we are being lived, and we are living beings. There's a time in every life where we must come to know ourselves as the center of the universe. We must come to know that we are responsible and accountable for our light, that we are the center of the universe, our universe. And how we live our life, the energy we bring into our relationships and our conversations, the quality of love and compassion, the genuineness of heart we seek to bring forth, we are the center of that universe. And we have the responsibility to do what's ours to do. But now if you'd place your other hand on top of that one, both hands on your heart. Hopefully there also comes a time when you discover that yes, you are the center of your universe. Far beyond that, you are centered in the universe. You are not alone. You are far greater than your thoughts. And so when we confuse ourselves, when a harsh thought, an impulse that is unhealthy arises, when these things come up within us, that's when we remember, I don't have to be the center of the universe because I am centered in a universe. I am centered in what is called God, and in that I live and move and have my being. And there is a power and a presence that can heal me, that can change me. There is that within me that can deepen my compassion, that can open my eyes more clearly, that can ground me in a greater sense of safety and peace, that can give me a new heart for creativeness, a new excitement towards life, that can transform my desires that had been selfish to desires that want to be of service. And so, yes, I am the center of the universe, but I am also centered in the universe. And so I open my heart to the presence of love, to teach me, to heal me, to guide me. I open myself to my own compassion and to be one who is most likely to express compassion, to be one who is mindful of my judgments, and to do all that I can to withhold judgment because I don't want to harm. And so I commit to harm none. And I also commit to tend to where it hurts. That is love. So I am the center of the universe. Far beyond that, I am centered within it. So back to this beautiful heartbeat. Your heart, my heart. May we choose to see beyond the different lampshades that we wear, ways that we show up, sometimes very dark and sometimes illumined. May we look through to the heart, to the light. May we find within us ways to stay connected to this presence in such a way that it permeates and changes the very atmosphere of every encounter, that it in some way can be a holy encounter. So gentle spirit flows in me, gentle spirit grows in me, gentle spirit shows in me, gentle spirit knows in me. Bring your awareness back. Gentle spirit flows in me, gentle spirit grows in me, gentle spirit shows in me, gentle spirit knows in me. Would you stand? We're going to sing it to you. Gentle spirit flows in you, gentle spirit grows in you, gentle spirit shows in you, gentle spirit knows in you. One more time to me. Gentle spirit flows in me, gentle spirit grows in me, gentle spirit shows in me, gentle spirit knows in me.